Well, in this video, I will be basically laying down the concepts of which can finally lead us to understanding the space-time manifold. So we started with a manifold structure, and as I showed in the previous video, I discussed regarding what are tensors and why we need the tensors, because we have a vector space here. So the vector space that we have in our hand, given a manifold, is the tangent space to the manifold. So as I have discussed in my previous videos, you see, whatever happens, the actual physics that happens takes place in a manifold level. So suppose you have a, this is suppose a manifold, and you have a trajectory of a particle. So even for talking about the velocities of the trajectory, or what is the positions of the trajectory, you cannot directly work in the manifold. What we need to do is that we need to go to coordinates like Cartesian coordinates, polar coordinates, and these coordinates are what we call as charts. Okay. So now as we go to these coordinates, so what is the very essence of velocities in these coordinates? You see, velocities are vectors, we always know, because as you might know, they follow the vector laws of addition, multiplication, whatever. So but what is the essence of those these vectors that we draw using arrows in the manifold level? So it follows from a certain definitions. So given a manifold M with a smooth atlas, then consider a set of functions. So these functions are from the manifold to the real line. So they are from the manifold to the real line. So immediately you can think of, like, if a particle is moving in the manifold, continuously mapping its position in one dimension can be said to be such a function. So these functions are called the smooth functions, and they form a class. They are infinitely differentiable function over the manifold C infinity M. They can be built to a vector space, which I have shown here. So but we will not be working with them directly. So the main part is here. So the main part is in this definition, that let gamma be a curve with a parameter of in the real numbers, and it is mapping to points in the manifold. The smoothness of the curve gamma can be understood because we know what does smoothness means in the manifold level. So if you have a manifold, you have another manifold, you have a function, you can bring them down to the charts level, and then when you have RD sets, then you can ask about what does it mean for this function to be smooth. Anyway, let gamma be a smooth curve. So you can think of gamma to be the trajectory of a particle through a point P, and it passes through a point P in the manifold, such that you can reparameterize your initial curve gamma to match the point gamma of 0 to be P. Now the directional derivative. So you see, already we have a directional derivative, the velocity kind of an essence, that P along gamma is the linear map, is a map that eats a function f and maps a very odd kind of a function that you see here. So here, what is this prime is important always to keep in mind, that this prime is the differentiation of this function with respect to the parameter here. So gamma will eat a lambda. So this derivative is with respect to the lambda parameter. So this is just the definition of a directional derivative. So what it means is that, so let's come back here. So you have a real line, you map it down the curve to a manifold like this, and how you define these velocities are in precisely this order. We will soon see that it will become independent of f, and it will really be a vector. So x at a point P to a curve gamma, because it is eating gamma also, it is using gamma also in its definition, is called a tangent vector to the curve at a point P. So given this example, what can be shown is that this function, this linear map here, all such linear maps corresponding to every possible smooth curve gamma that you can find can be made to a vector space. So that I will discuss later. So let's look at a quick example of real application of this derivative. So consider the real line. you map using curve gamma to a manifold. So this is a subset of the manifold, and then you bring it down using a using a chart map, and you are finally in d dimension, because this is a d-dimensional manifold. And this is composition. The O is standing for composition of XO gamma. That means you first act gamma, then you take the X, you read it backward, okay? And this is the composition of FOX inverse. So first you act X inverse, so you read backward again, X inverse F, okay? So now let this RD be D equal to 2, so R2. So then X of gamma be defined in this way. So straight away you see what is this saying is that corresponding to a real parameter, you are lying on various points in a circle, because cos theta and sin theta, if the parameter lambda is replaced by theta, are points in a circle. So once this is done, you can then say that FOX inverse. So FOX inverse will eat 2 points from R2, A and B, to give A square plus B square. So you see, this is just what I discussed. The first part is like a polar coordinate map where you use theta to parameterize your circle, and the second part is just the fact that you are using the radial part, A square plus B square. So given these two functions, how to find out this FO gamma derivative? So this is very easy. You just insert an identity. So this here, X inverse OX is an identity, and then you take the derivative here. Now we will use the Leibniz rule. Here you see the Leibniz rule. So derivative of this function is the partial derivative of this guy, at a point this, and then you multiply with this part. So x y prime. So you see there we are again using the Einstein summation convention. And then you can do the maths. You can see that this is just the algebra. So FOX inverse is this function. You derivatize with respect to 1. So that means the first argument, that is A, it will give you 2 times A. And then you have to evaluate it at a point x of p, where x of p will be a point here. You can see. So and that will finally give you 2 times cos of lambda. I hope this part is clear. It really follows from doing this calculation here. So at this moment, so you see it is 0. So this is a short calculation. So I don't want to go into detail, because the structure that we are laying down right now is very important. So we have prepared a set of linear maps, and these linear maps are what we call directional derivative. Now we have defined the linear map to be like this way. You can just put an identity here, and then you can again use the Leibniz rule, and then you have to define certain notions. So then you just define that XPF acting on this thing is just this part. So let me show that. So just follow this step of calculation, and now define del xi f at a point p. So that's this part. This is defined as derivative with respect to I FOX inverse at a point x of p. So this is what this means. So this is just the definition. So now why this definition is important is because now you can make an independent formalism of this linear maps, which forms a vector space, without the function f that you see here. So this is the formulation, because if you act with f on both sides, you will just reach here. So in short, what we have done is that we made a vector space which is called the tangent space at a point p. For every point it will be different, which is the collection of all linear maps such that gamma is for all gamma that is smooth. Such that how this linear map works is that this linear map can eat a function, and it will spit out a real number, that is f of gamma prime. at a point 0 such that gamma of 0 is p. And then to avoid this using this C infinity m function, we made another formalism in this manner, and then we said x, any x belonging to a point p to a curve gamma is defined as, it is actually derived to be like this form, of this form, such that this Vi is related as gamma I actually, because you see this is the relation between gamma and Vi. But now if you just omit this gamma from here, and if you just omit this gamma from here, it means that every vector belonging to the tangent space can be written in this form, such that the coefficients will automatically characterize which curve gamma we are talking about. And now looking at this form, it is quite clear to see that this is like saying that this is a basis expansion using the Einstein summation convention. So you see the similarity between a basis expansion and this function here. And this is of course the case because this TPM is a vector space, and the fact is that these del xi, which is I have shown here, are just the basis of this TPM. So these are the basis of the TPM defined in this way. So you see again, this, if del xi at a point p is a basis, it must belong to the vector space TPM, and you see that's what is happening here. You feed this vector with a function and it is giving you a real number. That's what tangent spaces are defined to do. And hence we have done a very nice construction of forming a vector space. And here I have shown that the y2 vector space forms a vector space, where y this element forms a vector space, because corresponding to a function element x gamma p and x delta p, these are the directional derivatives to two different curves gamma and delta, and you can add the intuition is that you can make the tangent vectors at each point, and then you can add the tangent vectors, and then you can pinpoint a new curve that is the tangent to that. So what I am trying to say is that suppose you have this as your manifold, you have one something like that, and suppose this is a derivative, a directional derivative. From that same point you have some sort of a curve like this, and this is the directional derivative. Intuitively it feels that this will be the sum of them, and indeed you can find a third curve from this point such that this is the tangent to that curve. So that's the fact which says that the directional derivatives forms a tangent space which is called the TPM space, and they have this as their basis. With this much fact that is laid, now you see once you have a vector space, you will have a covector space or the cotangent space, which we will talk about. So given a tangent space TPM, you can define TPM star, a cotangent space, such that a omega belonging to this space should eat a vector from this space to give a real number. But you see, but how will it do that? That's a big problem to see how to do this. For this we will again use our C infinity m function. So this entire thing after the omega eats this thing must belong to R. Now think of a different situation, that you have the function f that belongs to C infinity m, and let's define it to be a 0,0 tensor. Just forget about this even, and let's consider dpf. Okay, so let's consider dpf. So dpf will be a function from the tangent space TPM to a real number. Precisely what? So precisely this definition is precisely of a covector. So but now it is easy to see that, so dpf will eat a tangent vector at a point to a curve, and it must give a number, but I already know how to prepare a number out of this. I will just make this vector act on this c infinity m function, which is just f of gamma derivative at a point 0. So this is the point to say that, well, the vectors, the elements in the co-vector space should be of this form. So dpf is a element in the co-vector space. So, and what does elements in co-vector space do? They eat vectors to give real numbers. But the same thing is the definition of a 0-1 tensor, if you remember from the previous video. So a 0-1 tensor eats a vector because of a 1 here to give a real number. A 1-1 tensor eats a vector, a covector, to give a real number. A PQ tensor eats P covectors, Q vectors to give a real number. So that finally means that we have a covector space. But now if you have a covector space corresponding to a vector space, you should have a special set of bases called a dual basis. So how to construct that dual basis is also precisely located in the definition of this thing. How do we do that? So let us consider a candidate for doing this. So the candidate obviously is this thing. Why is this a valid candidate? Is because xi is like the ith coordinate of the chart transition map. You see, from a manifold you go to a real number and you pick up the ith coordinate. You will have d different numbers, you will just pick up the ith one. So this is also so xi is a c infinity m function, and this is a valid reasoning, and by definition here this is just this, and now you see the fact is this is just delta ik. So hence dpf is an element of a covector space which eats a basis element to give a Kronecker delta function. So this means that this forms a valid dual basis for the covector space. And hence, so the entire summary of this thing that I discussed today is the simple fact that corresponding to the points in the manifold, you have a tangent space which have vectors in the form of vi del xi. You have a cotangent space which have covectors in the form of omega I dxi. So I can put a p here, but I can suppress the p also. We will see that suppressing the p gives something called as a vector field, not a vector as such. But for now you can just think of this. So you have a vector space, you have a covector space, and automatically when you have a vector space, covector space, now you can look at the tensor spaces. So you can talk of a PQ tensor. So the next part will be characterizing such tensors, finding the tensor transformation properties corresponding to the vectors and covectors. One important point is that a covector eats a vector and is regarded as a 0-1 tensor, and a vector can eat a covector. You see how a vector can eat a covector is simply in the reverse way, by acting the covector with a vector. So and hence a vector forms a 1-0 tensor. Like this we will construct further tensors. We will also look at some metrics which are 0-2 tensors, and that's all. So this is a matter of keeping track of the definitions, and that's all for this video.